Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, my name is Paul, and this channel I cover things that I'm curious about and things that looks into I like to share. So with today's video, I wanted to talk about a few different ideas with death, rebirth, and new beginnings, right? And this idea for me happened tonight as I was on the phone with a friend having a conversation, and a lot of our conversation reminded me about something that I personally have gone through in the past. So I wanted to record a video talking about this: death, rebirth, and new beginnings. Okay. First, before going into this, I want to say the thing that grounds me into being very, very excited on every time a death, rebirth, new beginnings have is because I'm grounded in the idea of God's sovereignty, that he's in control of everything. And as Romans 8:28 says, that all things are going to work together for the good of those who love him and are called, for his purpose. And so for me, I got to say that from the beginning, because that lets me be optimistic every time I experience a death, rebirth, and thus a new beginning. If you are not grounded in that, I'll get into that in a second. So first of all, one of the reasons why this idea is so comforting of God's sovereignty is because we all can experience that a lot of things happen to us in life that we don't like, or we don't appreciate, or if we could have had it our way, we would have chose something different, right? There's a lot of those things. Sometimes things happen to us. Sometimes we cause things to happen that we didn't appreciate or didn't like. I know for myself, going through some of these events, if I could have had it my way, well, I would not be where I am today. There would be a lot of things that I would want back if it was according to me, but thus, as God would have it, there's a lot of things that I still don't have, or don't have anymore, I should say. Here's what is exciting. I can have all my own plans. I can say, okay, this is where I want to be in 1 year. This is where I want to be in 2 years. This is how I see my life at 25, 30, 35. Well, guess what? If those things don't happen, I have two options: either to get discouraged or to believe whatever God has in store for me, it is the best possible thing for me. So if something was taken away, or if I wasn't able to get something done, I have to believe that, and again, this is in the context, because I know you can also say, well, what if you simply just didn't put in the work? So it wasn't necessarily God withholding something from you. You could have just been lazy. Yes, there are those circumstances too. Like, let's take the example of the person who's like working hard towards something, or, they have, maybe they're wanting to get married, whatever, and it's just not coming yet. So let's give the person the benefit of the doubt. Okay. With that being said, so we can either get discouraged at the fact of not having things, or we can say, okay, I can trust in the fact of where I am right now. This very moment of where I am right now, I can trust God's sovereignty to say, okay, this wasn't what I planned, but I trust that he is in control of this. And so now I want to kind of get into the idea of this whole death, rebirth, in equaling new opportunities. Whenever any of us experience something that is just heartbreaking, or that's traumatic in any type of way, there is a death of some type that happens. For some people, it's a business failing. For some people, it's a breakup. For some people, it's just a whole myriad of things, right? There are a lot of things that cause us to have mini deaths, if you will. These are the moments in life that are forcing us to change. They don't give us an option. Like, for example, if someone walks away from you, well, and you try to get them back, but you can't. Well, okay, you're single. You can't change that unless you go out and do something new, and thus that would be a new beginning, right? If a business fails and like it just is just done, like there is no bringing it back. You either have to start a new one or never start one again. Well, there's no changing that. It's like, okay, you either can start a new one, which equals a new beginning, or never start one again, and I guess just go from there. So I'm talking about these examples in life that things happen and they're irreversible. Okay, at least for the time being. This is probably some of the most exciting moments that I have in my life, because of the hope that it's grounded in for me, which is in that scripture, that, okay, everything's going to work together for my good. It may not be according to my plans, but when a mini death happens, when a part of you that identified with something, it could have been identifying with your current position and then you got laid off. It could be identifying with, you know, the person that you're with, or, you know, maybe the degree that you're pursuing right now. And then, you know, something happens in life where you have to stop and then you're no longer pursuing that degree. All these things are things where something that we so closely identified with affects us, and it's almost traumatizing to us, because we almost go, well, shoot, who are we now? You know, what I don't even know who I am anymore. I don't even know what I'm doing. We could have that option, or we can say, okay, I don't know what this means right now, but if I do trust in God and that He's orchestrating all my steps, right? I can plan my own ways, but He's going to be the one that's establishing my steps. I can say, okay, that Paul is no longer here. That Paul, for whatever he was doing, or whatever he identified with, well, that has changed now. So I either have a choice to get complacent or to get excited at what God's doing, even though I don't know what's necessarily going on. And I want to give this quick example of what I mean with this. And maybe you can identify with this, or maybe you know someone who is like this. The people who have not accepted the idea and rejoiced at the idea of death, rebirth, and new beginnings are the people who, like, let's say the traumatic event happened, and they're the people who are no longer the same person. And I don't mean that for the better, like, oh man, like you used to be like this, now you're doing all these incredible things. No. This is, oh, like, what happened? Because you see the person who was once so lively, so energetic, and they are not even close to that anymore. Not saying that it's not bad to be, not saying that it's bad to be not lively and energetic, but it's like the person who once was, and then they're the whole exciting, ambitious, you know, self. Well, now that person is just dead and in the past. It's because they haven't yet accepted the idea of the death and rebirth. They've only experienced the death, and they are traumatized by the death of themselves, of what happened, yesterday or a couple of years ago. And so it then creates this lostness and almost this disassociation with reality, because they don't know what to do anymore. A lot of people experience this when they get laid off of jobs too, especially when it was coming out of nowhere, and they're just like, I don't even know what to think right now. I don't even know what's going on. I don't even know, I don't know why God's letting me go through this. It's all these things, right? Instead of saying, oh, this is strange. I wonder what God has in store for me. And then pursuing whatever is next rigorously, right? The people who accept it really, really well are the people who, let's say they had a business failure, right? And let's say they went bankrupt. Those are the people who go, man, like I was so close, or maybe I wasn't even close at all, but I learned my lesson. And you know what? I'm going to get back up and I'm going to go again, because I feel reassured in this direction, even though there's a big fat failure. The people who are like this, let's just take even this, for example. And these are some of the examples that I like to think about the most. You had Joseph, right, in the Old Testament, and here he is receiving tons of love from his parents, and then he has a vision. He's like, oh man, all my brothers are going to bow down to me one day. So then he's going out in his youthful optimism. He's like, oh brother, you guys one day, and they're like, oh my goodness, this arrogant kid. So they go sell him off, and next thing you know, he's spending years and years and years in prison. And no doubt he's in the questioning phase. Oh well, I don't know what this dream meant. And I don't, I loved my life that I had when I was a kid. And now, everyone's forgetting me. Everyone's forgetting me. And God, I'm just wasting away here in this, in this cell. And the next thing you know, God promotes him to, second in command, and all of what he gives him there, right? And then fulfills the vision. So there's this idea that you could have of, just because you experienced a failure, or just because you experienced a removal of identity of some type, because that's what Joseph experienced, a removal of an identity of being with his family. He was no longer with his family, no longer with his, nation, if you will. He was in a new nation, not around people that he really knew, and was being lied about and being forgotten. So it's this idea of, okay, well, I can either curse God and die, if you will, to take some language from Job, or at least from Job's wife, if you will, or I can just continue crying out and praying, even though I don't know what's going on, and holding on to the vision that God gave me, right? You kind of have the same idea there with David. He would, just a shepherd boy, then gets anointed, promised he'd be king, then gets, persecuted for a while, or gets chased by the king he refuses to lay hands on the king because he's like, hey, that's still God's anointed, even though he was anointed. And then, you know, after plenty of time getting chased and just receiving hatred, if you will, from the king, well, then God finally fulfills his promise in him. And so this is the ultimate of that idea of, okay, if you ultimately trust in God's sovereignty and God's ways, there will be plenty of curveballs along the way. There will be plenty of many deaths that you experience. There's going to be traumatic events that happen where you may go, who am I? What am I doing? You know, and you may not understand what's going on. But I think when we keep our eyes on Christ and on God through it all, I think that's when he works, you know, best through us. And to make this whole picture kind of complete, and like I said from the get-go, this whole video is grounded in the idea of trusting in God's sovereignty. Otherwise, you know, if you want to take hope from the many deaths that we experience and the rebirths that we experience numerous times in this life, you know, take whatever hope angle you want, but this is the angle that I'm taking. And this is ultimately where I see it fulfilled. When we are apart from Christ, and then we, you know, get saved and start walking with him, we understand that the old has passed and the new has come, right? So there's a type of, the old man has passed away, he is dead, and the new has come, right? We are born again. And so this is that idea in the Christian life, that even within this decision of following Jesus, there is a death and a rebirth, and thus a new beginning. And I think, at least this is how I see it, ultimately, I think all of these events that happen in our life point to the ultimate death and rebirth, which is that idea of when we are apart from Christ and then come to Christ, and then there's the dying daily aspect. For some reason, I'm thinking of Galatians 2:20. Maybe that's accurate right now. Maybe it's not. So look that up. Maybe it's fitting to this. But the idea of dying daily to ourselves, right? And so even in the Christian walk, there's that idea of, okay, each new morning that we receive mercies from the Lord, there should be this dying to ourselves and this coming alive to Christ. So in other words, a dying to our own desires, our own passions, and then a coming alive unto the will of God, and thus new beginnings each day, new beginnings each morning, and then we can walk in the goodness, right? And then this is summed up in the whole picture of the gospel, where there's going to be a death of the old world and a birth of the new world that Christ is going to have, you know, and then we're going to partake in that. And so I think that all these things are ultimately pointing to bigger pictures. And if we could only trust and get excited at new beginnings, I think there would be a lot of excitement. It doesn't mean that things won't hurt, because I mean, shoot, I think we all know that deaths almost never feel good. I mean, maybe for some people maybe it's a relief for some people, but I mean, last time I checked, I don't think it feels good. But I do think that there is a certain solid confidence and hope that we can have each time we experience a major setback, even if it means us taking like 5 steps back, right? And a lot of times those aren't encouraging at all, because we're like, man, 3 years ago I was further than where I was today, or 10 years ago, what's even happened to me these past 10 years, and just the conversations that we had with ourselves. So I wanted to put this video out there to hopefully encourage you, if you have had a death of some type, a mini death, an identity death, maybe an association death, someone that you loved is no longer in your life, whatever the case may be, that there is a death and there is no longer a piece of you who is, a piece of you who was no longer is. And I want to encourage you to be hopeful. It doesn't mean that we always have to love where we're at or anything like that. I think it's okay to not necessarily love it, but at the same time, I think we should always be hopeful and looking towards Christ, because even if things aren't working out for our own plan, I think we need to understand nothing has happened that's outside of God's plan for our lives. He is ultimately the one that's holding us and the one that's guiding us and the one that is establishing our footsteps. So that's my thoughts for today. Hope that was encouraging. And I'll see you guys in the next one.